What's going on, guys? Welcome back. Thank you for checking out this episode of the Keep Climbing podcast. We've been out for a week here. We had some snow. We've got some more today. We're ready for baseball season. That's for dead gum, sure.
Yeah.
And then the snow to go.
I am.
Some sunshine and a baseball field sounds great right now. We're getting into a time of year here where a lot of pitchers are thinking about working on different pitch types. So we thought today we'd talk a little bit more about grips, about seam orientation, about maybe when to start with certain grips, different ages, and some things to consider, I guess, of what truly makes the ball move the way that we want it to, desired outcomes for movement profiles, So that's what we're going to kind of lead into today. I think the first thing that that we just preliminary started to discuss here is grips and their overall importance for different age demographics.
I thought the interesting thing before we started was, and I went through this process with my son and just learning and listening to what you say and things I'd heard and just talking about holding a baseball, what makes the baseball move, and how you set yourself in motion that way, because some of that stuff, was different than what I'd heard. And one of the things that I think is cool, but you're looking at it, you go, well, I'm just telling you what experience and things like that. So when you start the process, how can you make a ball move? I always heard people say, I didn't pitch, so I didn't throw it hard enough. So, but a slider, I've always heard people do like this, of course, a basic four-seam fastball. What do you, a changeup, some people throw a changeup with a four-seam grip too, correct?
Yeah, no doubt. The end of the day, when you talk about pitch movement, pitch profile movement, we're trying to get the seams to rotate in a certain way. As they rotate, the physics and the aerodynamics of the ball, going through the air, essentially makes it move into a certain way. And I think that.
So how does Blake Trinan make it look like a wiffle ball?
Yeah, so right. And a lot of people can do that. And this is kind of where it comes down to it. Like, you watch these videos on social media, you hear a guy like that talk, Devin Williams being from St. Louis, having played with him and listen to him talk about his changeup, he doesn't hold it like anything special. That's why you could see a video, you could try somebody's grip and it just not work for you.
Right.
Typically, when you're looking at grips and trying to make suggestions or, thinking about things, there's obvious staple grips that are more likely to work from person to person. We don't just make up grips on the daily, but typically speaking, your grip is going to supplement kind of how you hold the ball, how you release the ball, and your release the ball kind of comes from how your whole delivery works together, right? So typically when we talk about pitch design or movement, profiles, the way the ball moves, really from any age, you start with kind of a back to front mentality of okay, well, how does the pitch currently move? What's the goal for the pitch to move? Okay, then how you holding it? Okay, yeah, well, then how you throwing it? You kind of backtrack off of, first and foremost, because we're not messing with grips that already move really well.
Right.
We're not. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. But then after that, it's a little bit of trial and error through pitch design sessions that you've got to find a two-seam grip that maximizes the movement capabilities of it, that fits for your body. Right. So there's all these different two-seam grips. Well, which one's the right one for you? Which one should I do? Which one should I start with? Which one should I? And some of that, there can be some variability to that. Sure. I think the younger you get, the consideration is well, how comfortable do I feel throwing this for a strike? Right. Which is totally reasonable. I think the older you get and the more movement or velocity or whatever you need to get the better hitters out, the more important it becomes to find a grip that moves a ton, that you can really practice to learn how to throw for more consistent strikes. Sure. I think that's typically, as you get older, the route you want to go down, because basically when the game shifts from like just needing to throw strikes and you're a good pitcher to like, okay, we got those quality strikes to be a good pitcher now. Like, depends on what level you're playing at, depends on what, what kind of competition level like you're at, as far as like, how old you are and number of years, but also like what level you're trying to play at.
The one thing, because we talked about this in the last show, because we were talking about curveballs and when should you throw it, when all those, the debatable things and whatnot. As you're talking about here, and we were talking before we started, everybody starts at some point. You deal with a lot of high-level athletes and high-level profile players, and you're talking about some serious stuff, and we'll get to that. But I think it's interesting because there's a lot of people that watch it are just looking at, I've got a 10-year-old. How does he throw a baseball? What am I teaching? What can, what is the basis? Where's a starting point? And how do you set, if you're looking at this, you've been through this process, what's a starting point for somebody?
A starting point with a fastball grip per se, or a two-seam specific, or just. Well, I think a lot of it comes down to like training age and biological age. Like is he 8 and just learning how to pitch? Is he, my son's 5 turning 6 this year, and like is he just picking up a baseball for the first time? Is he 12 and an early grower and throwing a little bit harder?
Right.
Is he 17 learning how to throw 90 to 92? I think it all. As everything, I've said it multiple times on multiple shows now, like works in a progression. I think that at the end of the day, the younger and younger you get in training or biological age, the more important just like athleticism, comfortability, and repeatability is, right? So like if they got to hold it with 3 hands because their hands are small, let them. Like the goal is just to get the ball to its intended target, right?
Right.
And then as you get older, there's some subjectivity in it, and like what the goal is, I guess, from player to player or coach to coach, team to team, that, once the goals transition to, how much force they're able to like throw the ball with and how much velocity, like how much, shapes and different things they're trying to create with the ball, then I think that's when it like starts to matter or transition from hold the ball comfortably to like hold it in a certain way. Now, holy cow, that could be 11 for some people, some coaches,
Right.
like in some players, and they're playing super competitively and they're trying to do all those things. If it was my kid personally, I would try to delay that for as long as possible, simply because we talked about last show that like I'm way more concerned about building a better thrower way before I'm concerned about building a better pitcher, simply because if we can raise the ceiling of his throwing capabilities, then his pitching capabilities also, right? I think some people are so quick to not build athletic throwers and want to jump right into pitching that they miss kind of the tool or skill of being able to throw really well first, and we talk about it like in not making robots, like not making, like in all these cookie cutter like pitching drills that we've all done at times and seen or whatever. And I think some structure like that is generally a good thing for little kids. So don't get me wrong. But, in essence, like, I'll give you my personal example too. I know I've shared this before. Like I didn't pitch till I got older, but I did a ton of throwing stuff and pitching lessons and pitching stuff when I was younger. So I had like a comprehension of like what I was trying to do. I didn't pitch on a ton on my teams when I was younger, and I think my dad had a little foresight and like saving my arm, so I think is a little bit strategic, but I think the concept of just like building a really good thrower first, and then you got like your capabilities, and all of my advice to the little kids would definitely be to, don't pitch until you absolutely have to. It's way more fun to hit and play shortstop.
You played in the middle infield, right?
Yeah.
Do you think now, so talk about that a little bit, as far, you're talking about becoming an athletic thrower.
Yeah.
How did that go into, just the basis of then when you started pitching, was that, did you transform? Did you change arm slots? Or was it when you first went to the mound, you just kind of threw as you were throwing from shortstop?
I think I had enough. Some people do. I think me personally, I had enough like pitching instruction, that I had some type of idea in my head of what I wanted it to be or look like from, a pitching coach that I had, multiple pitching coaches that I had when I was young. But also just like watching games on TV and like whatever, like, by the time you're 12, like you've seen how many like games like that, like you have a perception of like what you should look like as a pitcher,
Right.
especially if you're, motivated, like really playing a whole bunch of games, like pursuing baseball, like passionately at that age, which I was, So I think you already have this idea of what it's supposed to look like. I think the thing as you get older, you're just trying to learn how to use your body from a more static position to create energy to throw the ball harder and better and more efficient and make it break more. So, which, to be honest with you, I think I started doing probably when I was 15, 14, like pretty regularly. And I didn't stop that till I was done playing, like that's not something you ever
Right.
stop doing,
Right.
You're always kind of trying to, be more efficient, throw more strikes, throw a little harder, add a new pitch, like whatever, So, that's just like the journey or evolution of being a pitcher, that if that process is, lacks athleticism or coordination or whatever, that like you don't develop at the critical 8, 9, 10, 11, and young, maybe even younger years as a thrower, then like I think that's kind of what helps establish your floor and your ceiling, if you will. And so many people are so quick to jump into like this very regimented, pitching structure
Mm-hmm.
that, especially without a wider concept of what that does to a player's arm and health and longevity,
Yeah. It's
like
interesting.
I mean, what? Yeah, think about it this way, right? We all did pitching. I did pitching lessons when I was younger, and I know it's extremely popular out and still in today's market. And then think about like the way this is why we have maybe a hard time with doing like straight up pitching lessons, is that you think about a way we'll take a grown man, a professional baseball player, through a throwing program to best protect his arm, to teach him, what he needs to learn, right? And like that guy will end his season around Labor Day. He'll take a couple weeks off, and then he'll start throwing a baseball, hypothetically, around like October 1st, let's say. And he's going to throw a baseball for 3 or 4 months before he ever gets up on the mound. Okay? And then we're going to do a 11-year-old pitching lesson where Timmy came out from basketball practice, hasn't picked up baseball since last July, and we're going to start a pitching lesson on December 12th. He hasn't thrown a ball in 4 months. You didn't prep his arm at all.
Makes sense.
You didn't prep his
That
arm
makes
at all.
sense.
And that's an 11-year-old kid who has no strength, stability, coordination, like whatever, So I've said it before, like some youth pitcher, youth training programs.
Yeah.
We have one, we run one. The most common thing that I hear is that like, well, when are we going to do more like pitching mechanics or whatnot? That like throwing mechanics are the foundation of pitching mechanics. Arm health and fitness is the foundation of pitching health and longevity. So whatever. Maybe
makes
we're
sense.
getting off on a little bit of a
No,
tangent there, but the point of it being that like, yeah, let's not be in a race to do too much too soon, to try to be the front of the pack, when I promise you, like everybody who gets older around baseball, the best pitchers when you're 11 and 12 aren't the best pitchers when it actually comes to like the times you care more about.
Pitching.
Meaning
Right,
17,
yeah.
18 state champions, state championships, or college opportunities, or whatever, anything after that. And so that encouragement, I think, to a lot of people is that I think they do it with a good place in their heart. They do it where it's like,
I
I
understand
wanna
what
get
you're
better
saying.
faster,
I get it.
right? With some patience to let that evolve and work on fundamental things, so we don't put the cart in front of the horse. And the grip, basically, tie it all back to what we're saying. The grip is the tip of the spear to that entire thing. Like, just get the ball to its destination as an athletic, like, and work on getting stronger for like a while, before you get really technical or try to build a robotic pitcher.
I want to what I see, and this is always what's interesting to me, and just getting to know you a little bit more as we've had conversation after conversation after conversation. This to me is where I think your passion really lies in what the philosophy of the program that you're working with.
No doubt.
And I think it's because I go back through and think about the things that I always look back and go, wow, I don't,
Yeah.
we could have done that better.
Yeah.
Right.
That's the only thing that drives me to do what I'm doing right now is that
Right.
from 12 to 15-year-old Brett, what the heck would I have told him if I could right now?
Yeah. And you
Amen.
look back and you say, what could we have done better? My son going a bit this way and this way. Okay, fine. Yeah. But what I love about this conversation with you is because I think about that, and always the basis when we were working with, kids at 7, 8, 9, and 10 was always just a base mechanical throwing position and then movement when you're throwing.
No doubt.
I think we talked about this last time. I love just a step and throw drill.
Yep.
That
No doubt.
brought the body movement into your throwing mechanics.
Yeah.
And turning and making.
Athletic throwing move.
Right?
Yeah, no doubt.
Just that basic, simple process.
Mm-hmm.
And then how does it
And you
feel
let that
coming out of
kid do
him?
1,000 times before you ever start to talk to him about, your pitching mechanics or and I say that typically with like air quotes because usually when what I mean by that is like me to put you up on the mound and say, well, your leg's supposed to go like this, and then your butt's supposed to go like that, and then your front side's supposed to go like this. Like, holy cow, they can barely like chew gum and walk at the same time, and we were going to get them all doing all these same sort of things. Well, a lot of the approach is more so of like create an environment where they can just do an athletic throw a whole bunch of times, and we work on movement qualities and capabilities, and we work on strength, and you'll see that they'll learn, like they all want to throw strikes and throw hard. You'll see that with some patience and the quality environment and accountability to the environment for sure. I'm not saying just like, yeah, go throw against the wall over there for a while and I'll come see you in a little bit, like it's guided, it's accountable, but, go let them do something like that and watch how much more of a, like stride they make and how much simpler it is to maybe pick a lot of those things up that, the phrase we kind of toss around all the time is like, don't give a mechanical cue to a movement issue.
I thought it was interesting, and I bring this up because we were down a couple weeks ago with the Southside Prospects. Eric Rule runs that, and they were his son, and he's got some guys. They had I think it was 7U, wasn't it, Drew? They were all 7-year-olds. Yeah.
Nice.
So,
yeah, perfect.
one thing.
Perfect.
And I'm watching the drills they're doing, and the one coach had the kids, and he was just rolling ground balls, but he had them all on their belly, and they had to field the ball, and throw it back to him. I thought it was right. Isn't that what you're talking about?
Yeah, hey, man, I love it. Be coordinated, be athletic, keep it fun, keep it engaging. I love making them all do push-ups when they're buddy next to that too. Like, put a little pressure on them. Like, yeah, I think that's fantastic. I think it's fantastic. So as far as the grip is concerned in that entire like process or the evolution of that, once the goal shifts from, the just, turning your paper in for a completion project, like just getting the ball to where it needs to be, that's when the grip starts to become more and more important for sure. And I think it involves of how important it gets as you get older, right? Because I think we could take this whole conversation into a much higher level conversation of, I say it a lot of times to, maybe like our, sophomore, junior, senior, kind of it's skill dependent, not necessarily just age dependent, but I would say typically that's when you start to have that conversation that, at least when I was that age, and I kind of laugh at them or, kind of joke with them a little bit of saying like, yeah, you just have no idea like how much just your fingers moving on the ball, a couple of seams like actually makes when you start to throw 90, 92, and you know what I mean? Like, because the way the seams are created here is meant to give you an advantage to move the ball, right? That's why certain grips work for certain people, and certain grips like that I could throw and make it move a ton, well, you could throw and it doesn't move as much. Okay, well, why? It's because I'm finding grips, that maximizes my capabilities or my, the way my body's put together, the way the ball comes off my hand, and and slight little bitty subtle differences can be all the difference, like where this is the horseshoe of the ball, right? And like where the horseshoe of the ball like goes. At the end of the day, that seams shifted wake is a big conversation or big topic that gets talked about these days. And that basically just means that the ball's moving more than what the spin or tilt of the ball would suggest it should move, right? Which is why some guys like Blake Trinan can just throw a two seam and it like takes off, or
Crazy.
some people, and so being able to like see and quantify that, but then also being able to like repeat it from person to person is where like a lot of the technology like comes into play, because when you start throwing 90 plus miles an hour and you're talking about like variations like that, like, yeah, I obviously can sit there and say, wow, that was a really good one. That one moved. When you start to take TrackMan data with it and quantify, well, it was 6 inches further than the other one. Okay, we like that one. That's the one we want to repeat. Well, what made it move 6 more inches? And then you got all these other. Yeah, can you remember? And then can you feel it enough to repeat it?
Yeah.
And holy cow, I've seen some fantastic pitchers come through there. That we were just talking about one whose name I'll leave out of it, but was in the big leagues for a long time. Like good friend, great guy, great pitcher, and for him to throw these different pitch types on there and for them to move the exact same way every single time he threw it, that like TrackMan was putting up the exact same dot, it looked like, for 20 pitches in a row, like how hard that is to do, because that means every detail of what makes that ball moves was damn near exactly the same,
Right.
Which is just, for some people, unfathomable, because you go and maybe we do some testing. We just got back from Chicago, do some testing at our satellite facility in Chicago, and some of the younger players there like got good stuff and they're going to be good pitchers, but like the variability in their movement types is just because of a consistency repeatability thing, like
that's the difference between that level
100%.
and everything below, correct?
When think about it too, you start thinking about it that way. How much harder is it to command the baseball, or throw strikes when it moves different every single time?
Right.
Okay. You've got, that's why that overall progression. So we talked about it weeks ago.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And I think what you said was, I think a player needs to learn how to command the baseball before we start talking about velocity. And that, my answer to you, do you remember my answer?
Yeah.
My answer was like, well, yes. Well, yes. In general, I would agree with that, because basically what I just told you is that, like, yeah, whatever you got to do to hold on to the ball to get it to where you needed to go. But eventually that changes, because the ball's moving, like you're throwing a slider and one time it goes 8 inches of horizontal, and the next time it goes 18. That's 10 different inches, right? That's 10 inches that if I start it on the corner and throw it off, it's a ball every time. But if I start it here and throw it here, and I got variability to it, it's way harder to land that and throw it for a strike. I think once you get older, you've actually got to really dial in your movement profiles. You got to be consistent enough with how you're delivering the ball. And you could even say that with a 4-seam or a 2-seam. 2-seam is going to run whatever, 16 inches, and then one's going to run 8. Like, you got the same issue there. You got 8 inches different of play that, is the difference between a strike and a ball.
I think it's interesting because we look at, you're talking about pitch mixes, and you're talking about how can I grip a baseball? How does it feel? How am I being consistent? And if I can throw a baseball 95 miles an hour max, right? Mm-hmm. But I can't make that move at 95 miles an hour the way I want to, then I've got to figure out how to command. Now, we're talking about here. So that's one of the reasons why I think about that thought process. I've seen a lot of kids just try and maximize, velocities.
As hard as they can. Yeah, right.
Flawed. And I get it.
Flawed, no doubt. That's not what I'm suggesting at all.
No, exactly.
Like balance of all those
and
things.
I think that's where those things come into play, is how do you get a kid to understand grip and understand feel, understand all of these types of pieces with a baseball in his hand, and be able to hit a target that far away from him.
Well, I think the at the end of the day, it's just spend more time with the ball in your hand.
Right.
Like
One
what
of those, right?
well, I just mean, no, I mean like throw the ball more, like
Yeah.
be on a good, consistent throwing routine, like practice more, like now that doesn't mean go out and like throw a long toss every day, throw off the mound every day, throw pitches every day. Like you need to have some idea of like workload and recovery times and keeping your arm fresh and, when to push it, when not to, but like, when you build up to a throwing program for in season, like you should be throwing 6 days a week, like you will be during high school season,
Sure.
like because coach have you out there practicing. So, taking that into account of like how to build up my arm and prep for that and how to build up maybe for my skill to prep for that, like that's going to be expected of you, deliver the baseball to where you want it to go.
Right.
Every coach is going to say like, yeah, to play any position on the diamond, I need you to do that basic thing. And, yeah, so I mean, in general, like spend more time with the baseball in your hand, and spend more time with the baseball in your hand, and get more reps. And so now go back to the previous bullet point we were just talking about, and like youth training, youth pitching, youth whatever. You spend more time with the baseball in your hand by like holding and performing like a quality throwing program, not going to a pitching lesson once a week and getting tweaked that, and then you only got 27 pitches into the bullpen, then how much do we get out of that from a rep and a time with the ball in your hand,
Right.
So now there's a time and place for talking and educating, and like those are all fantastic things, but without this subsequent or like follow-up activities, then it's incomplete.
If you got, we were talking about earlier, and I say this, and I've always kind of believed these things. These are, basic fundamental principles. I believe that, when you're working to do something well, you want to try and do it within the structure of how to do something. Because we were talking about just like a 9, 10, 11-year-old. I always believed, put the ball in their hand the way they need to throw it. And you were talking about, hey, I don't care how they, whatever feels comfortable.
Sure.
And I think those are things to me that are not set in stone.
Yeah, absolutely. Subjective. And I think that it probably depends on what you think the capables, or what the player's capable of.
Right.
For sure. Mentally and physically, right? Like you've got a smaller kid on the team whose hands are just way smaller than the biggest kids on the teams. Like you should always have different expectation levels of probably every player that's on your team, and try to categorize them, at least categorize them into like a top, middle, and bottom, and just compartmentalize it maybe that way. But yeah, I mean, every player, I think that's where the subjectivity in that like progression falls, is that like every player is, ready for a different amount of things, like as you go, that, oh, well, we turned 12 this year, so we all got to start holding the ball with 2 fingers. Like, I'm not suggesting that that's a bad thing.
Right. No, I
really
get
not,
you.
because I also get all of the difficulties or parameters that coaches in general, especially younger coaches, like have to deal with. You're trying to kind of standardize, or maybe kind of have some curriculum of like, and
Sure.
I do generally think that structure, like I said earlier, is a good thing for them. And at the end of the day, anytime you make any type of adjustment like that, it's always uncomfortable for the player to start. Like, so just go ahead and expect that, right? So I don't know. Like I would lean on and trust the coach's like understanding of his team and his players and his families, that if that's right for them, then do it. But
Yeah.
but the point of it is that it's thought out. It's intentional. It's not just like I'm pulling stuff
There you
out
go.
of thin air. That like
You're doing it just because we're going to do this.
yeah, because someone.
I
told you
think
you
that's
should,
wrong,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Because
All that stuff should be
everybody, you had kids at different, I like that thought process the most, more than any, because we've had this conversation on the hitting side. I've had it with, I'm going to throw my buddy Mitch, under the bus here a little bit. We always have this conversation. It kind of goes back. I'm going to use this analogy on the hitting side, because, at 14U, everybody goes, you got to swing a -3. Well, there's some tournaments, the tournament companies, you don't have to. You can swing a -5. And if a kid is 90 pounds at 14U, you're trying to put a little bigger bat in him, and the bat's swinging him still. And I've always had these conversations, whereas it kind of goes to the same point you're making.
Yeah.
It's still a matter of what can the athlete do at that point in time, correct?
Capabilities. Yeah, capabilities, mental and physical. I think because I don't think you want to say, well, you got to throw the ball with two hands, and the kid feels uncertain about it. Maybe he already felt uncertain about it. Two hands, two fingers.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe he already felt uncertain about three, and you're gonna make that kid throw two now, and you just like made him way worse, and it's just in his head before he ever even threw a ball. Like that's not good either. So dosing all those things out appropriately. I think just being intentional with your words and your actions, is just important when you're dealing with kids, like it just is. So yeah, I mean, the older the kids get though, like I think the more you've got to encourage them to try some of these things out, go back to my like junior and high school conversation. That conversation at 17 years old is different. And this is how it typically plays out. You take this scenario happens, holy smokes, more than a dozen, I promise you. Okay. Because we have data to suggest, player types, if that makes sense, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like you could throw a 20 pitch bullpen, and at least based off of that bullpen, I want to make it suggest like it's absolute, because there is some variability still for a 17-year-old pitcher from day to day, like what their movement profiles, like on a TrackMan or something like that, would suggest that you could throw 20 pitches, and I could tell you right now, like what grips you probably need to throw, just based off of the way that the ball's already moving now. So my circumstance here now, my analogy is that 17-year-old player, he's 92. Okay, this is a guy that's a stud, and this is hypothetical, but this happens all the time, right? So 17-year-old throws 92. He's the best player in his class, or whatever, at his school or whatever, and strikes everybody out. He's awesome. He's gross. He's disgusting. He's the best pitcher on your team. Okay.
Right.
And he throws all four-seam fastballs. Well, so he starts to get 17. He starts to get a little bit older, and we start to realize that, okay, this kid's special, and he's going to go play at, Division I school X.
Big school
Okay?
U, right? Yeah.
Has a chance to get drafted. So then we start to have these conversations about, well, what does it take to get the next level of hitters out? You're trying to help him and prepare him, and you got to balance a little bit of where he's at right now, what type of competition he's going to face this spring as a junior in high school. That's really, really good. But also, like, I want to keep encouraging him to get better and things that we know that he needs to get better at, XYZ. And he's thrown four-seamers all his life. How the heck do you go and talk to that kid and you convince him, with some conviction, not just like, oh yeah, I'll try it because Coach Brett said so. Like, no, he's like, heck yeah, I can throw a nasty two-seamer.
Right.
That's tough, man. That's tough because that kid is like, and that's the same maybe psychology, very different, ends of the spectrum for that 11-year-old kid whose hands are too small, smaller than everybody else, and he still needs to throw it with three fingers just to get the ball where it wants to go. You're going to tell him he's got to throw with two fingers. And he has to because it's my way to highway because everybody 11U does that.
Right.
Versus this other kid,
Mm-hmm.
It's the same thing. He's uncomfortable throwing a grip that you want him to hold, and it's going to affect his performance.
Yeah, because no confidence.
No confidence. Yeah, the ball feels weird in my hand. I've been used to throwing it like this my whole life.
Right.
And now you're going to make me throw it like this. And if I don't think first that this is really nasty and I'm going to be really good with this, then I'm already beat. Maybe that kid doesn't even get beat that year, but maybe he just doesn't have as good of a year as he could have or should have, even throwing four seams. Like, so navigating that as a coach and like understanding what they're mentally like ready to handle is huge. Because at the end of the day, what I think you probably do for the kid who couldn't handle it is you say, hey, you go be yourself and you go dominate out there. The minute that last pitch is thrown, we've got to maximize as much time as you have till you get on campus, because we know that the next level of hitter is going to have a better chance of hitting that 92, with a two-seam profile that you're throwing more like a four-seam. So essentially, obviously, the difference would be like if I'm throwing a pitch with a four-seam grip that traditionally would have more what we call ride or carry, right? Higher induced vertical break, that if I'm holding a pitch like that and I'm getting it to like run a little bit, then think about the capabilities we would have to actually hold a grip that runs more.
Mm-hmm.
So we're not throwing a grip that contradicts the way we let go of it and the movement profile that God naturally bestowed upon our body.
Oh, okay.
Right? So use a grip that maximizes your natural capabilities. Because the way your hand works like this, the way your arm works, the way your shoulder works, the way your whole torso works to rotate your body is going to ultimately have an impact on how that baseball moves. So if it's saying and suggesting that you're a like sinker or a two-seam guy, and we're holding a grip that doesn't maximize the performance of that, it won't be as good as it could ever be.
That makes sense. Because honestly, growing up, I was pretty average baseball player, but I always had to throw kind of like this. It just felt better.
Yeah. Supinator.
So,
like football.
Yes.
You probably went to throw a breaking ball and somebody told you, just throw it like a football.
Yeah.
Yeah, why?
Yeah.
Because you throw a football with supination.
Right.
Yeah, it's great. Fantastic. That's how I learned how to throw one too.
Right.
Yeah.
I got to ask you, so when you do that, when you start thinking about, as if somebody, wants to pitch and whatnot, that's the best way to look. What's their basic natural overhand throwing motion?
100%.
Yes.
Yeah, 100%. You just, at the end of the day, holy cow, I didn't hear somebody say this until I was like 25, 26, 27 and had already, played a decent amount professionally and was like, dang, 15-year-old Brett really wishes he could hear that right now. Is that like, just be great at what you're already good at. Yeah. When I was older like that, the way that conversation came about for me is because I had a really wise coach, that had seen a lot, had, helped a lot of players, had been, in the trenches with a lot of like really successful pitchers from the major leagues all the way, down. And, I was talking about like a changeup, another pitch, working on a pitch that like really wasn't a good pitch for me, like wasn't a go-to pitch for me. And he said, man, like, you think at this point, like you're going to develop a changeup that's better than that curveball? Because I had a good curveball, It's like, well, no, I'm probably not, like not at 26, 27 years old. Like, he was like, well, why wouldn't we just spend more time like getting even better with your curveball, and the goal's not always, throw it harder or make it move more nasty. Or like the goal at that point starts to get into the comfortability execution of like, well, let's throw it 2-0. Let's be in a bases loaded 2-out, 2-0 count. And still have the confidence to say, I'm going to throw a breaking ball right here.
Right.
Like, so getting deeper, people, when they think about pitching development, they think that they want to get like wider on everything, right? Like, I want to throw a 2-seam and a 4-seam here, and I want to throw a changeup, and I want to throw a cutter and a slider. Because that's like this picture that we've painted in everybody's heads of what a major league pitcher looks like Greg Maddux, right? Well, while that may not be false, okay, Greg Maddux did not get to that point because he tried to do everything at once.
Right.
Okay. Right. He was really good with his fastball and his fastball command, because that's just the way the game works. Everything works off your fastball. Everybody hears that, right? That's God's truth for sure. Okay. Basic. God's truth about baseball. I think he wrote it somewhere on a tablet somewhere.
Throw a fastball.
Yeah. It's etched in a stone somewhere. Okay. So that, and then you work on getting one pitch really, really, really good. And holy cow, there's guys that make it all the way to the big leagues because those two pitches are really freaking good, right? And then we've got a 13-year-old coming in to throw a 25-pitch bullpen. He's going to throw 5 different pitches. It's like, what are we doing? We're wasting our time is what we're doing. Because if we're going to take time, like we only have so much time, no matter what we're doing, okay? That if we're going to take our time and divide it by 5, all those things are average. Or not increasing at the rate that they could be with more time and attention focused on those specific things. So the way you go about doing that is you get one pitch really good, okay? And then you get 2 pitches really good, okay? And then where most people get off is they think, well, I got to add a 3rd pitch. It's like, no, you got to get better at those 2 pitches first, okay? And they don't understand what good enough on those 2 pitches is. Okay, and that doesn't mean don't work on a 3rd pitch. It doesn't mean don't throw it and catch play. It just means like don't lean on it. Don't think that it's gonna be a 20 or 30% usage pitch for you. Like, can you flip a couple changeups in there for your 3rd pitch? Like, absolutely. And my suggestion would be to go fastball, changeup, then breaking ball from a training economy standpoint, not an
agreed
standpoint like we talked about last time, right? But like change up, mainly because I think like when you're 12 years old, you can still just start. I think it's easier to
With
maybe
3
talk,
fingers,
teach 'em.
right?
Yeah, just. And remember last time we talked about like, okay, if I'm gonna throw a fastball with these 2 fingers, just throw a fastball with these 2 fingers. Let's see what it does
Right.
first. Like keep it simple.
And let me ask you too, because in that, just real quick, just kind of a side note, you put that ball just a little deeper in your hand,
Yeah. 'Cause
and you're knocking off a couple miles an hour, right?
it's friction. Yeah, I mean it's very basic like physics or science of how what happens to a baseball, what makes a baseball slow down.
Right.
Like if we don't want our arm speed or our delivery speed to slow it down, we have to figure out ways to manipulate the baseball, like the speed of the baseball, so I can still effort wise with everything try to throw it as hard as I can, but it doesn't come out as fast, right? Like yeah, you've got like the depth at which maybe you hold it, but also the angle at which you release it, right? What I typically tell people, what made sense in my head at least, is that like you want direct energy straight into the baseball to throw it as hard as you can, right? But then if I'm trying to it's hard to maybe say in words that make sense, but like throw the baseball as hard as I can, but it not come out as hard as it can, well then the energy just gets less direct, right? Like if I'm on a clock and it's like right behind the baseball, 12 o'clock or whatever, right?
Right.
Like the more I get on the side of it, the more the ball's going to spin still really fast, but the energy is not going directly into the baseball to propel it forward as fast as it can. Same thing with the changeup, that we just want to get more on the inside of the baseball. Like
and that's where
behind it.
Yeah, and that's where they talk about arm angle and arm speed being the same, being consistent.
Yep.
But changing how you do things. That's where grip comes in, doesn't
100%. it? Yeah, that's where grip comes in. And then now, like, we could get real deep on it because we were talking about before the show, too, on, like, a changeup specifically, right? You're talking about, like, well, taught to, like, pronate on the changeup. And that's absolutely true. We pronate on every single pitch, okay? And some people with pronation capabilities can do that. Can take a basic looking changeup grip and just really pronate as they come through their arm slot to not put the direct energy into the baseball, right? And they put it into more of the side of the baseball to create a little bit more of the side spin. Cue the Devin Williams changeup, right? The sucker's spinning like this, and that's why it's got as much movement as it does, right? But there are really, really good changeups. This blows people's minds too. This is seam shifted wake. There's really, really good changeups that people actually cut. And because of the way it interacts with the ball or with the air, they cut it out of their hand, and the way the seams are oriented, it takes it and moves the ball that way. That's what seam shifted wake is that on one side of the physics of it, the one side of the baseball like has less direct air, and it is making the slow side of the baseball go slower and the fast side of the baseball go faster. So it takes it in a perceived
pushes it
different
almost
direction.
in that direction.
Yeah. Yes, exactly what it does. So yeah, I mean, then when you start talking about change-up grips, well, we got to know how this guy's put together first. We got to know, is he a pronator? Is he a supinator? Is he a, and are we not just relying on his ball flight analytics to say or suggest that, because that's also flawed. What people try to do now, they get dangerous enough on understanding ball flight analytics from like a TrackMan or something like that, and they just see movement profiles on there without seeing like grip and seam orientation. They just assume that because this guy can move the ball this way that he's a pronator, or just assume that which is not true either. Which is not true. It's incomplete. You can make guesses, but until you kind of see, some, type of range of motion data, and then you can see some type of, ball flight video, so that your eyes can kind of confirm that the ball's doing actually what it suggests it's doing from a movement, profile. But that's incomplete just to look at some of that stuff. So, the more we get, I feel like the more info we get, the more we realize we don't know, but that's also why it's important to like do your homework, do your research, and not just, be constantly learning, be constantly evolving, and trying to like put more of these puzzle pieces together. Don't read something, see something, hear something, and just, so quickly jump to a conclusion, So, but yeah, I mean that grip, these different like circumstances or hypotheticals that I've given, like these are conversations we have all the time, like with players like this, that there's complexities to it, that unfortunately, because of how it's not unfortunate, but like because of how popular baseball is, maybe how popular baseball media is and baseball content, and watching games on TV and announcers are talking about spin rate and whatever, all this different stuff of how popular it is and it has gotten, that people come in with like perceived, preconceived like thoughts or feelings or whatever about it that
I'm sure
it's different.
Yeah.
It's different. And the simple truth is just that like what got you here is not what's going to get you there. That's true about everything. So
I always like, kind of just to, as you're saying these things, and it goes back to some of the things that I've come to, because I've been very cookie cutter in those respects, and you think about things and whatnot and what you do. But the more you look at it, you got to look at the athlete. How do they move? What, because it kind of goes back to, and I've said this, it's not how you start, it's how you finish. A hitter, nobody looks the same in the batter's box. Very few people look the same as they start. Same with on the mound, you got guys that, they used to throw it over their head like that and come down and throw the pitch and whatnot. We don't even do that stuff anymore. Where's movement, how those things.
Yeah.
Guys pitch from the stretch.
Yeah.
They don't, the regular windup.
Yep.
It's not just one thing that's going to get you where you need to go.
Yeah. Yep. Amen. And I think one of the hardest things to balance for a coach is that, like, you got a coach and he's got, I don't know, 10 to 20 players, on his team, on his staff. How hard it is to take such an individualized approach with that. Like, I'd argue in a lot of those cases or circumstances, like the coach is just there really to guide everybody as a team. Like it probably makes more sense for it to be standardized or templated, if you will, and then the player typically has to seek out individual information about himself to equip himself with how to make an individualized training approach. Now, until you get into certain environments, but like
Sure.
a younger 12U travel, whatever team, like I don't really think that that's the environment for like a super big individualized approach, simply because it's not feasible. And, unless you're like
not mentally prepared for that yet.
100%, 100%, like the player, much less
Yeah.
the coaches too. You know what I mean? Like they're like, that environment is meant to be like for reps and for, it's meant to be for that, like, so that's why as you get older, I think you start to like seek information and whether it's driven by player or driven by the parent, like you're just seeking information to, better equip yourself. And I think throughout that process, like what that grows and evolves into college. And then if a player like makes it into professional baseball, is just like trying to become your own best coach.
Yeah.
So, and that should be everybody's mentality, is like, I want to be my own best coach and equipping myself with as much information and technology that I can get my hands on, because the more you learn about it, the more confidence and conviction it gives you when you go out there and pitch, that you're prepared, or that, what adjustments you need to make in real time. And you're not sitting there waiting for the coach to have to take a mound visit to say like, hey, you're flying out on your son's shoulder, It's all things we do for 10, 11, 12-year-olds because they're little kids, but you want to grow and evolve past that. So yeah. And look, I mean, in that environment, you want a kid to do that. You've got to let him explore a ton of reps to feel what it, and then encourage him and hold him accountable and say, hey, you flew out on that one. Hey, you didn't. That was good. You were behind the ball. Like whatever, with some feedback, whether it be from you or from data or whatever, that it was a quality rep or that it wasn't, so they can associate feels with outcomes, desired outcomes.
Sure.
And then that's where you start to like drive home the, I don't know, body awareness and things that you want to evolve for that trajectory to now start having those higher level conversations.
Yeah.
Instead of the cookie cutter approach where you just put them in a, pitching lesson environment and you say, well, move like this and do like that. And, and you think that 30-minute, word vomit at times. Some people do a great job. I'm not trying to bash that at all. Okay.
I understand.
But you think that like that education on what the pitching delivery should look like is more important than the reps and environment that we're creating for a player, right? Now, they both should probably coexist in the same light. One's probably incomplete without the other.
Right.
That's the sweet spot. So I'm not suggesting that it's
I agree.
better or
Right.
worse.
Right.
It's just that, you want a player to be able to self-correct in June when he's in the third inning of your championship game and he's kind of getting by, but he keeps pulling his front shoulder out and he's 2-1 in every count. Like one of those environments is going to help create that for you. One of them's not. One of them's going to create a dependence and a not a self-reliant like athlete player, right? Like not building an athletic thrower by doing that.
Gotcha.
So all right, well, that's all we have time for today. I appreciate you guys. Appreciate you for checking out this video. Appreciate you for joining with us. Yeah, that's right. We got to keep on climbing. We don't ever look back. We keep on climbing and we keep on getting better. But thank you guys. Drop us a comment if you guys got any questions, comments, concerns about what we've talked about today, any other topics or things you guys want to hear more from us in the future. And we'll see you guys next time.